10 jobs so cursed they were erased from history. Modern jobs can be soul-crushing. Emails, meetings, deadlines. But at least your job doesn't involve crawling through a sewer to collect coins, or eating bread off a corpse to absorb its sins. Welcome to a time when employment meant pain, suffering, and often death. These jobs were so cursed, they were literally erased from history. Not because they were boring, but because they were horrifying. Let's begin. Number 1. Leech collector. In 1830s Europe, medicine was still fumbling in the dark, trying to cure everything from hysteria to headaches with one trusted method: bloodletting. And leeches were the preferred tool. But where did all those leeches come from? That's where the leech collector came in, a job so miserable it makes a desk job feel like a spa day. Collectors, often women and children, waded into swampy waters barefoot, allowing the blood-sucking parasites to attach to their skin. The logic was simple. The more leeches that fed on you, the more you could gather and sell to local apothecaries. The practice was both dangerous and dehumanizing. Many collectors suffered from severe blood loss, infections, and skin diseases. A day at work meant coming home with legs covered in wounds and welts, and if you fainted from blood loss while in the water, good luck. There were no protective gloves, no boots, no first aid kits, just raw skin and murky water. Some collectors resorted to slapping themselves or smoking pipes to distract from the pain. Others brought animals, dogs, or even livestock, as decoys to lure leeches off their bodies. The worst part? If the supply was low, some would reopen old scabs to draw leeches faster. You weren't just harvesting leeches, you were feeding them, and society just called it work. Number 2. Sin eater. Picture this: a quiet rural village. A body lies in its casket, a crust of bread placed carefully on its chest. And then a man, dirty, gaunt, and avoided by everyone, enters to eat that bread. That man is a sin eater. Sin eaters were common in parts of 17th and 18th century Britain. When someone died with unconfessed sins, it was believed their soul couldn't pass on peacefully. So families hired a sin eater to symbolically consume those sins. They'd place bread or ale on the corpse, and the sin eater would ingest it in a short, somber ritual. The payment? A few coins, maybe a meal, and a lifetime of being socially exiled. These people were considered necessary but cursed, walking receptacles of spiritual corruption. They weren't allowed in churches, weren't welcomed in homes, and were rarely spoken to. They were blamed for plagues, bad harvests, and bad luck. They lived alone, died alone, and were often buried at crossroads or outside cemeteries to prevent their tainted souls from haunting the living. Some sin eaters believed they were genuinely absorbing evil. Others saw it as superstition, but took the job anyway, because poverty doesn't care about theology. Either way, the role came with a psychological weight. You were literally internalizing death. Ritual after ritual, you became the village's garbage bin for guilt, fear, and judgment. Imagine being paid to spiritually rot from the inside out, while the community that needed you treated you like filth. That's the sin eater, a job that combined theology, superstition, and misery into one deeply cursed profession, and people say customer service is bad. Number 3. Fuller's apprentice. In medieval Europe, people wore a lot of wool. Warm, durable, and fashionable if it didn't smell like a barn. That's where the fullers came in. Their job was to clean and thicken woolen cloth through a process called fulling. Sounds harmless until you realize the primary cleaning agent was stale human urine. Enter the fuller's apprentice, the guy who got to do all the stomping. In giant vats of cold, fetid pee. The ammonia in urine broke down grease and impurities, but it also broke down your spirit. Apprentices would wade waist deep into these vats and rhythmically stomp for hours, sometimes days, in near total darkness. The smell alone was enough to induce vomiting. Many got skin infections, ulcers, or respiratory issues from the ammonia-rich fumes. And this wasn't a one-time gig. It was your daily routine. Your clothes reeked, your skin burned, and no one wanted to sit next to you, even if you somehow managed to avoid smelling like a sewer pipe. Sometimes apprentices would pass out from the fumes or collapse from exhaustion, and they were replaceable. There were always more poor boys willing to jump into the pea pit for a sliver of bread and a few coins. The next time someone says your job stinks, remember, at least you're not literally fermenting in human waste. Number 4. Resurrectionist, aka body snatcher. Imagine digging up a body at midnight while watching over your shoulder for cops, grieving families, or worse, other resurrectionists. That was the gig. In the 18th and 19th centuries, medical schools were desperate for cadavers to dissect, but the law strictly limited how many bodies could be legally acquired. Enter the resurrectionists, also known as body snatchers. Their job was to dig up freshly buried corpses and sell them to anatomy professors under the table. These weren't hardened criminals. Most were just poor people trying to survive. But the job was gruesome and risky. They dig fast, avoid damaging the body, then cart it off through alleys and shadows before sunrise. Some used long hooks to pull bodies from shallow graves without fully digging them up. Others disguised themselves as mourners to scout fresh burial sites. Getting caught meant jail, beatings, or worse. In some towns, grieving families would booby-trap graves with tripwires or set up armed watches. And that's not even touching the smell, the rot, or the possibility of catching a disease from the corpse you were hauling. Eventually, some resurrectionists, like Burke and Hare, skipped the cemetery altogether and just started murdering people to sell fresher bodies. When your job description is steal the dead but try not to join them, you know it's cursed. Number 5. Matchstick Girl. In Victorian-era matchstick factories, girls as young as 12 worked long hours dipping wooden splints into white phosphorus paste. It was delicate work, and the factories preferred small, nimble fingers. But the danger wasn't the fire, it was the phosphorus. White phosphorus is highly toxic, and repeated exposure to it led to a horrifying condition called phossy jaw. It started with a toothache, then came swelling in the jaw. Eventually the bone would rot, literally glow in the dark and fall apart piece by piece. Victims emitted a sickly green luminescence and a stench so strong it cleared rooms. The pain was unbearable. Surgery was often fatal. Those who survived were disfigured for life, often hidden away like shameful secrets. And the factories? They kept hiring, because there was always another girl desperate enough to work. Matchstick girls weren't just exploited, they were erased, blamed for their own illness, cast out, and buried without names. All so Victorian elites could light their cigars with something elegant. In the end, the spark wasn't worth the suffering. Number 6. Tosher. In Victorian London, the sewers weren't just pipes, they were labyrinths. Dark, damp, filled with waste and danger. And for some, a workplace. Toshers were sewer scavengers. Their job? To wade through the city's underground muck, looking for lost coins, jewelry, or anything remotely valuable. Armed with a lantern, a rake, and a sack, they'd slip into the sewers at night when the flow was lowest. What they faced wasn't just filth. It was lethal. Methane gas could choke them without warning. Flash floods from sudden rain could drown them in seconds. And let's not forget the rats, hundreds of them, often aggressive and territorial. The stench clung to their bodies. Infections were common. Cuts turned septic. Some toshers didn't come back. But there was profit in the sludge. A lucky night could mean enough copper, silver, or even discarded goods to buy food for a week. That tiny hope kept them returning. But society never respected them. They were seen as bottom feeders, criminals, or worse. And yet, they provided a service no one else dared to touch. You think your job is dirty? These guys quite literally worked in humanity's waste and did it with pride. Number 7. Chimney sweep. When coal ruled the 18th and 19th centuries, fireplaces were essential, but chimney soot built up quickly, and someone had to clean it. That someone, sadly, unfortunately, was often a child. Master sweeps would purchase orphans or impoverished boys and train them to climb inside narrow, soot-choked chimneys. These kids, sometimes as young as 4, crawled up and down the shafts with brushes, scraping soot from brickwork and breathing in thick black dust the whole way. They often got stuck, suffered burns, or fell. Some suffocated to death. And then there was soot wart, a rare form of cancer that attacked the scrotum of all places. It was one of the first cancers ever linked to an occupation. The kids were often beaten if they hesitated or refused. They were rarely washed, underfed, and slept in basements. Many were permanently deformed from years of crawling. Eventually, laws were passed banning the practice, but not before thousands of children suffered for the sake of a clean chimney. Number 8. Arsenic green dye worker. In the 1800s, everyone wanted to wear green. Dresses, wallpaper, curtains, it was the color of wealth and elegance. But hidden in that rich shade of emerald was something deadly: arsenic. The compound used, copper arsenite, was beautiful but toxic. Workers who handled it developed sores, nausea, and sometimes died without even knowing why. Women working in dye shops would glow faintly, their hair falling out, their teeth loosening. Arsenic dust clung to everything. Even customers weren't safe. Rooms decorated in arsenic wallpaper sometimes made families sick. Babies died in their cribs. But the style was fashionable, and denial was easier than regulation. Some dye workers went mad. Others died quietly. All of them were forgotten the moment another shipment came in. So the next time someone says fashion is pain, remember, in the 19th century, it was often fatal. Number 9. Plague Doctor. We've all seen the mask. Long, bird-like beak, wide-brimmed hat, and dark cloak. But plague doctors weren't just eerie Halloween costumes. They were real, and the job was a terrifying blend of medical guesswork, spiritual posturing, and near-guaranteed death. During outbreaks like the Black Death, plague doctors were hired by towns to treat the sick, record the dead, and try not to die in the process. Their beaked masks were stuffed with herbs and spices, meant to protect them from miasma, bad air thought to spread disease. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. They had no real treatments. Their tools were things like bloodletting knives, hot pokers, or simply prayers. Some did their best, others were glorified accountants, tallying corpses. Either way, they were often quarantined along with the dying. Many plague doctors never made it out. Those who survived were often shunned, and some were con artists exploiting the panic for money before vanishing into the night. You weren't just a doctor, you were a symbol of death. And that bird mask, it wasn't to protect them, it was to keep others away. Number 10. Whipping Boy. In royal courts, discipline was tricky. You couldn't exactly spank a prince without risking treason, so they came up with a solution: the whipping boy. This was usually a noble-born child, raised alongside the prince. They were educated together, played together, became close, but if the prince misbehaved, the whipping boy got punished. The logic? Watching a friend suffer would teach the prince a lesson. In reality, it taught him how little consequence looked like. And for the whipping boy, it meant bruises, beatings, and humiliation for things he didn't do. He couldn't object. That was his job. And being close to power meant nothing if it came with a belt. Some whipping boys grew up scarred, physically and mentally. Others faded into history, their names forgotten while the princes they took lashings for became legends. Imagine being punished because your rich friend threw a tantrum. That was the job. Loyalty, pain, and invisibility. So next time you're stuck in a Zoom meeting or dreading another shift, just remember, at least you're not knee-deep in sewage, glowing from arsenic, or spiritually absorbing humanity's sins one crust of bread at a time. Some jobs were lost to time. These, they were buried on purpose. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more weird, dark, and oddly fascinating dives into the past. Because history might not repeat itself, but it sure left behind some cursed job descriptions.